Good evening, and I want to thank you guys for joining this spring 2019 edition of the College Democrats versus College Republicans political debate. We're going to be talking about some very hard-hitting issues. We're going to hear from both sides, and the first topic we're talking about is environmental concerns. I'm going to toss it now to our Democratic panel for them to introduce themselves and give their opening statements.
My name is Justin Thompson.
Hey, my name is Jake Burdett.
And I'm Eleanor Lee. As Democrats, we agree with the vast majority consensus in the climate scientist community that not only is climate change real and happening currently, but also that human activity is by far the main factor in causing and accelerating the effects of it. While climate skeptics routinely frame humanity's impact on climate change as an unsettled and debated issue, the scientific community has nearly unanimously agreed that humans are the primary drivers of climate change for decades now. In fact, climate scientist James Lawrence Powell performed a meta-analysis of every peer-reviewed scientific article containing the terms global warming or climate change, and found that of the 13,950 peer-reviewed articles written on the subject from 1991 to 2012, only 24 came to the conclusion that humans are not the primary drivers of climate change. This means only 0.2% of the experts on this topic disagree that humans are the leading contributors of climate change. It is incredibly rare for the scientific community to be this unanimous on a single issue, so we feel it is inherently anti-scientific and even dangerous for anyone to still deny that human activity leads climate change, given the abundance of evidence we have at our disposal.
Thank you, Eleanor. We just heard, kind of how the Democrats feel, what the real cause is of this climate change and things of that nature. I'm now going to toss it to the Republicans for them to introduce themselves and give their opening statements.
I'm Bradley Ditmars.
I'm Matt Wilson.
And I'm Daniel Lathrop. Good evening, everybody. When it comes to climate change, I think we all agree that it exists. We all agree that humans do have a pretty outsized impact on it, and that we do need to do stuff because whether or not the change is good in one area, bad in another, we know that any big disruptions in the climate are going to cause disruptions for people, for the economy, for all sorts of things, and for everything on the earth. The question then becomes, how do we deal with it? Do we go about large government programs? Do we go about spending tons and tons of money that we have no way of recouping on projects that we have no idea whether they'll succeed? Or do we take a better approach? Do we take an approach that uses the strengths of our economy, that uses the strengths of our ingenuity and of our nation and all the nations of this earth to really come to good conclusions, to come to good solutions, and to solve things in a proper way, using the freedom that we have, using the resources at our disposal, using the things that we can actually put forward today towards projects that actually will help. Thank you.
Thank you. So we heard the college Republicans, they were very based on solutions. So my next question is going to be for the college Democrats. Both sides have acknowledged that there is this need to curb climate change. So what are your proposed solutions?
So obviously, the main one that's in the news right now is the concept of a Green New Deal. Now, this means radically transforming the way that our economy runs, transitioning away from a fossil fuel-based company or a fossil fuel-based economy where we give massive subsidies to companies like Exxon who are making billions of dollars and doing awful destruction to our environment. So moving away from those old fossil fuel industries that are actually slowly and sometimes even quickly killing us, and seeing the opportunity that is staring us right in the face of new green technologies like solar, like wind, which are actually two of the fastest growing industries in the world. And if we don't take advantage of moving towards these new green technologies, which would also create thousands or millions of jobs, then other countries like China are going to take advantage of this opportunity, and we're going to miss out on that massive economic boom. So really taking the bull by the horns, not living in the past on these dinosaur fuel sources, and actually embracing the future and the potential benefits that it would definitely bring us.
What time frame are you looking to start enacting these things?
So when it comes to climate change, we have no time to waste. The time to act was years ago, and we did not do it. We've been ignoring the evidence for decades because of companies like Exxon, who are profiting off the environmental destruction, paying off politicians, funding their own sham studies to downplay the effects of climate change. So we need to do this immediately. We needed to do this yesterday. UN reports are coming out that if we don't drastically change things by as soon as 2030, the world is going to change completely as we know it. We're going to see, we're already seeing the effects of climate change in terms of worse natural disasters, in terms of flooding in coastal cities. All these things are going to be expounded if we don't act quickly. They say by the year 2100, the Middle East might not even be habitable for human survival because things are going to be so hot. We're already seeing in some parts of the world wars over water because there's not enough water to go around. So these effects aren't just waiting for us, they're already happening, and we need to act now.
Thank you. So now I want to toss it to the College Republicans. Obviously, everybody has their own solutions, and let's hear what the College Republicans have to say.
Would you like to go?
Well, the most immediate solution that I'm seeing, at least in the short term, for climate change is to get off the fossil fuels. I do agree with you on that. But the solution is not immediate flipping of the switch. Suddenly we shut down all of our fossil fuel. It needs to be a gradual shift. I feel like nuclear power is the best alternative we have right now. Solar, hydroelectric, geothermal, that's all a great idea. We need to be going towards it. But nuclear is the best standoff to what we have now. Once we get an economy and an industry that can survive without fossil fuels, then we can put all of our energy into deriving alternate forms of energy, whether it's biofuels, like I said, solar, wind. Those are what we need to be going towards, but the process needs to be gradual and through the hands of private corporations, which have proven time and time again that they are far more effective and faster at dealing with changes in both the economy and society as a whole than government regulation.
Thank you. So a hotly debated topic is the United States withdrawal of the Paris climate deal. And I want to toss it back to the College Republicans. Do you support the withdrawal of the Paris climate deal? And if so, why?
As far as that deal goes, I'm personally pretty wish-washy, could take it or leave it. One of the things that they don't tell you in a lot of these deals is that it's kind of non-committal. You look at what's going on in Paris right now, and they had pretty much after signing it, just kind of went back home to their house on the Champs-Élysées and said, okay, we're finished. Let's take a little break and figure out what we can do. A little bit later, they came back and decided, okay, let's decide to maybe add a little bit of a tax to gas. I think maybe that would work to get people off that. People didn't take it very well. If you saw over this last summer, there was the whole Gilets jaunes movement, the yellow vests. They were in the streets every weekend, burning the city down. If that's going to be the reaction we see in the most liberal countries of the world, the most environmentally friendly countries of the world, these ones that we look to whenever we talk about environmental future and what we should move to, these are the countries we look to towards environmental policy, and the reaction from it, something like the Green New Deal, something like massive changes in terms of costs of gasoline or other things to prompt that sort of thing, they are not going to go over well here, and we need to find an approach that doesn't go by what some group of people in Davos or Paris said.
Thank you. So I have one more question to send it back to you. Let me ask you, so what do you believe the United States' responsibility is? Like, what level of the responsibility is the United States to start to curb this climate change? As in, the United States has many more resources than some of the other more developed countries and can start to be an impact if that's what they deem to do. So.
Well, one of the things, I agree with what Bradley here said. It can't be like an overnight thing, like just shifting from fossil fuels to other stuff. We do need to make a gradual, shift towards, using newer stuff. However, one of the things I want to, go back to is, that Green New Deal. It's a very expensive plan and would require a lot of stuff to be changed. And I feel like the United States itself isn't as responsible as, other countries for the climate change, other countries in the Middle East and the East itself. So I feel like we as a country should make the gradual shift, but we should also support those countries and encourage them to also make the shift towards newer stuff too.
Thank you.
I've got something to add to that.
Sure, absolutely.
The goal, actually the whole entire role of the United States since really the end of the Second World War has been a global leader. We're a global superpower. Currently, we're the only global superpower left. Soviet Union collapsed back in '91. So we are left now at a very unique opportunity to shape the world as we see fit. And right now we're at a crossroads. But again, as he was saying, the gradual shift is necessary, and we should be leading that. We should be taking the reins and putting the world towards an energy source that's sustainable but also practical. Part of the Green New Deal demanded no more airplanes. To be frank, I don't see how that could possibly work. There is not a company in the world that is not dependent on air travel at some sort or another. We are such a globalized economy now that business deals, trade, all happens through the air. The seas are still incredibly important, but your overnight shipping from Europe wouldn't get here overnight. It would be weeks from Europe. And we've just developed as a world so fast and so large that the provisions made in the Green New Deal are just simply not probable, not possible in this world.
So when you say a gradual shift to renewable energies, what year would you like to see us get to 100% renewable energy by?
Well, here's how you could look at that. I don't want to set a year on it. If we take a look at something like, let's look at an example in the past. In California, probably I'm going to butcher the year, probably like 10, 15 years ago, decided, okay, we want to have a lot more electric cars on the road. So they basically went to the companies, they went to GM, to Ford, to all these companies, said, okay, you guys, if you want to sell cars here without some massive tax, you got to build this new electric car. The companies at that time, they didn't have the technology. They were maybe starting to work on it, maybe starting to think of it, but they were like, no, we're not ready for it. It would cost us way too much. So basically, the company found a way to work with the state, and eventually they just killed their own project, basically suicided it into the ground by stopping anyone from buying anything. So that was kind of the end of that. 15 years later, one of the largest cars in California, and one of the most talked about brands in the world is Tesla. And they're an all-electric car company. Basically, you can't rush a technology because then people are going to refrain. People aren't going to buy it. People are going to fight back because they see it as something hurting them. If you can give it to them a way that comes through innovation, comes through ingenuity, and becomes something that they want, you're going to be a lot more successful.
Toss that back to the college Democrats for rebuttal.
I definitely agree with that. I also think one thing when dealing with renewable resources is location is definitely an important factor. For example, I learned about in one of my classes that they wanted to build a bunch of windmills 8 miles or something like that off the coast of Ocean City, which isn't very far away. And the only reason that the vote got shut down is that people thought it would ruin their view from their vacation homes because they didn't want to see windmills off in the distance. So I think that's definitely an important factor in thinking about renewable sources like these. I definitely agree that it's not an overnight thing. You can't just snap your fingers and be yeah, we're renewable energy now. So I definitely think we need to take more factors such as location into hand when thinking about how to come up with new renewable energies.
I'm going to pose a similar question that I posed to the Republicans back to you guys. Do you feel that regardless of any deals, whether it be the Paris deal, whether it be regardless of what other countries are doing, if other countries are not doing anything, do you think that the United States should still inherently take responsibility and change the climate? Even if it costs, even if it hurts them economically?
Well, as the Republican Club said, the United States is a symbol of power. They are the leaders of the free world. So don't you think we have the moral responsibility as the leaders of the world to lead the cause in climate change, to be the ones to lead wind power, to be the ones to lead hydroelectric power, to be the ones to even lead nuclear power?
Yeah, and I would add on top of that in terms of the cost, it's not a choice of green energy or economic boom. In fact, we can't afford not to move to renewable energy because the costly destructions of climate change is going to cost us at least $70 trillion, according to National Geographic, and that's assuming that we are going at the rate that we're going now and not, increasing the rate of using renewable or of using fossil fuels, which we are increasing the rate that we're using fossil fuels at. So $70 trillion in terms of the cost of climate change, that's a very conservative estimate. It's likely going to be a lot more than that. So the Green New Deal costs a couple $1 trillion. Well, not doing the Green New Deal costs $70 trillion. So we can't afford not to do this. We have to look at this as this is a job creator. This is how we're going to outcompete countries like China, who are currently investing in other countries around the world in Green New Deal type policies. And they're gaining allegiances to other countries. They're making alliances. They're outcompeting us on a global level. So, yeah, the U.S. has been the sole superpower since World War II. We try to take leadership on other things that are, quite frankly, very bad for the world. But now we have this one opportunity to take leadership on something that would be great for the world and set the example for the rest of the countries. And we're choosing not to do it, and we're letting other countries take the bull by its horn and reap the rewards of that economic benefits. And I also want to make one last point in terms of you're saying the technology is not there yet. Well, we said we're going to go to the moon. The technology wasn't there yet, but when the U.S. puts its mind and says that we're going to do something, we're going to invest our resources into it to outcompete these other countries, we do it, and we did it. No one would have thought in 1945 that we would be able to get to the moon in a matter of 20 years, but we did it because we knew that wasn't even all that important. This actually is important. Our survival of not only our country but the world depends on this. If we invest the resources and we have the political will to do it, we can do it, and it would actually be good not just for us but for the whole world.
All right, a quick 45-second question to the Republicans. Do you feel that in the past, recent history, the United States has been doing enough, or do you think that there could have been more that's been done?
Can always do more. I think we've been on a path that's been better than other countries. You look at the Kyoto Protocol before we had the Paris Climate Accord. We're the only country that met the standards. We're the only country not to sign on. This kind of goes into that sort of idea again. Just because they sign on doesn't mean they're going to do it. I think that we've been making progress. If you look at where a lot of pollution in, say, the oceans is coming from now, it's not from the U.S. It's from Africa. It's from Asia. Countries still developing. We're on the path, and we'll get there because we're going to not do it through government mandate. We're going to do it through private individuals.
All right. Well, now I am going to leave the panelists to make their closing statements. I'll start with the Republicans.
So no one can deny that climate change is indeed a real and actual threat to humanity as a whole. Where Republicans and Democrats today differ on it is how to actually deal with the issue. Republicans prefer the private corporation. We prefer individual competition between companies. We've seen throughout all of human history, really, that when the people are given the tools to do what they need to do and regulation is removed, they are far faster at creating the solutions. And the solutions tend to not only perform better, but last longer than the solution that the government would have proposed.
Thank you. And Democrats, your closing statements?
Well, I'm glad that our friends in the college Republicans do acknowledge that humanity is the leading driver of climate change. That used to be not something that the Republican Party admitted, but I'm glad that they are now on the right side of history in that regard. But I think it's kind of ridiculous to say that corporations are the solutions, because when you look at the problem, corporations are actually the leading causes of climate change. It is just a handful of corporations that create most of the pollution in the U.S. And I would also like to fact check if, third world countries really are the leading contributors of climate change. That just doesn't really click with me, because there's a lot more industry in developed countries than undeveloped countries. So that doesn't really square well with me. But yeah, corporations are the problem, not the solution. We need to have a government-planned economy to force corporations to move in the direction of green new energy, because if you leave it up to their choice, they're always going to do what's most profitable for them, and oftentimes what's most profitable for them is to, rather than dispose of their waste in a clean and safe way, to dump it in a river.
All right. I want to thank both sides of panelists for discussing this very important topic. In the meantime, we're going to have these guys get out of here, and we're going to get some new panelists in to talk about criminal justice system and the things going on in the United States today regarding that. We'll be back soon.